So distinguished guests, as the first speaker from the government of Rwanda, let me welcome you all. And let me thank really the organizers to have chosen Rwanda as the second destination for the African Philanthropy Forum after the one that took place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia last year. So it's a very important topic that we are going to touch now, and I'll be sharing some of the ongoing initiative in this perspective, both at the continental, but more importantly, in the case of Rwanda. So more than 1 billion people worldwide still live in poverty, the majority of which are women and youth, and particularly living in the rural settings. To foster the broad-based growth and sustain poverty reduction, that requires consolidation of efforts from public, private, and the social sector, particularly the philanthropists. And the question is therefore, how can we be more effective and more efficient, both collectively and individually, addressing poverty and development issues? And here there are some thoughts that we really need to consider based on the discussions that was initiated this morning. Third and most important is the partners. Here we have three key partners on board. So we have the private sector, we have the government, and then we have the social sector. In Africa, like any other place in the world, we believe our economy can only grow when they are led by the private sector development. So private sector is a very important player in this regard. But for the private sector to deliver efficiently, this requires an environment that is conducive. This is really enabling, and that's the role the government needs to play in this regard. And I can give an example of the Rwandan government. We've made a number of reforms to support private sector growth in this country. And I have seen a number of the rankings that are taking place, including the one from the World Bank, doing business, where Rwanda is really increasingly become almost the second or the third around the continent, addressing requirement both in regulation, making sure that our policies are sound to support private sector growth together with our partners. The third partner is, of course, the social sector. And the social sector here, and this is probably one of the key issues that we'll be discussing during the day, to me, I believe the social sector can really support inclusiveness. Inclusiveness both in the social sectors, education, health, but also in the economic sector as well, particularly in the rural area. The second part of my speech is really to consider now the context that we are in, particularly starting from Africa. And here we're talking about education. More generally, we're talking about skills development. If you look at our education in Africa, it is still predominantly supply-driven. And there are a number of reasons for that one can discuss. In the early 60s, 70s, education was really focusing on addressing public civil servant because there was no private sector at that time. And I still believe we have been, in Africa, too conservative to move into an education sector that is innovative, flexible, addressing the demand side. That's really our main issue. How do we create a model that is demand-driven? I think that's really a serious issue that we need to address in Africa. When you look at the MDGs, indeed, most of African countries have managed to raise access to basic education, particularly to primary education. But the most critical issues is still raising the quality and relevance. Again, the issue of harmonizing our education system, aligning with a number of efforts happening to create more integration, economic integration around the continent. We had a conference almost 3 weeks ago here with ministers in charge of vocational skills and employment. And one of the issues that came out was this harmonization. Indeed, we believe the private sector in Africa is growing, mainly due to critical sectors, including infrastructure, mining, hospitality, and others. But we are not able to create the workforce that is skilled enough to take up, some of these opportunities, employment opportunities that are happening. We are now calling, following the meeting that took place, to see how we can collectively, as Africans, address some of the critical issues that will help to raise quality and relevance and provide the skilled manpower that our private sector need. Of course, this will require a strong partnership, as my colleagues have suggested. Private sector is so important. We definitely need them on board to make sure that they contribute their part in addressing the skills gap that Africa is facing. One of the important issues that came out was the issue of getting qualified trainers. Trainers are so important. I was part of a conference that took place in Dubai early this year, and we were discussing on how to empower teachers. And people were coming out with issues of quality. How do we define quality of education? Some people might suggest there is no standard in terms of defining quality, but to me, I told them, there are a few things we need to fix. That can definitely, even if we cannot agree on quality definition, but there are things we need to fix from education or skill development. One of them is really to get the right teachers, to motivate teachers. That's very important, to make sure that they have skills, both technical and pedagogical skills, as well as soft skills. We also need to make sure that we have adequate materials, workshops that are really properly equipped, making sure that we give opportunity, particularly on the vocational, to raise internship opportunity for young people so that they can work in an environment that is really conducive to help them gain more practical skills and hands-on skills. And in the case of Rwanda, as I close my remark, I would like to share with you some of the things that have been happening and that we are pushing much in this regard. One, how do we move from a great number going to general education and try to transit to vocational and technical skills? So we made a decision to move from a 40% of TVET, what we call TVET, that is currently, and 60% to general education. Then we need to reverse, to have more students going to technical and vocational, particularly when they graduate from the 9-year basic education, to 40% going to general education. And within those 60% going to technical and vocational, we would like to make sure that at least 50% are female. So we are part of this campaign that is known as a He for She, and Rwanda had made a pledge to make sure that in the 5 coming years, we raise the number of female going to technical and vocational at least at 50%. The second most important undertaking in this regard, again trying to address the issue of relevance, was the establishment of a national employment program that can allow to integrate some of the critical issues that we need to address as we try to raise the number of youth going into the labor market. And those are making sure that we provide vocational skills to as many people as possible, including female. We facilitate access to market, particularly in the rural area, and also we promote financial inclusion, because indeed it is so important. Most of the enterprises that we need in Africa to continue growth are not yet, they're not yet there. They're not yet established. So we need to create as many small and medium enterprises as possible. The second and most important aspect is also to establish that linkage between public and private through what we call sector skills councils. Those sector skills councils are made of people from public and private, and they advise vocational schools to make sure that they have specific curriculum that are competency-based that can help to address some of the issues that our private sector face in terms of getting skilled manpower. The other aspect is also, as I said, strengthening access to finance, particularly for startup businesses. Here in Rwanda, we have what we call Business Development Fund. This is an institution that was established by government to provide guarantee to some of these young people that want to create enterprises so that they can access loan. Finally, and more critically, is the way we integrate information and communication technology into our education system, because this is the world we're in. Last week, we had a big conference here on Transform Africa, and a key point of that conference was because of the raising of connectivity in Africa, we don't benefit much, particularly in education and private sector, on this broadband that is coming up, and would like to make sure that the broadband allows to create more innovation, and more importantly, to transform our private sector so that we can become more competitive and more productive. So in brief, this is my remark that I wanted to share with you. And again, as I said in addition, I would like to welcome you again to this country, and I hope this two-day forum will pave the way to strengthen the African Philanthropy Forum, particularly support education and skill development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister, for setting the stage for us. Let me first begin by introducing my other panelists. To the left of the Minister is Richard Lewis. Richard is the head of strategy and human resources at the Artisan Training Institute in South Africa. It is a leading privately owned artisan training center which provides the full range of skills around electrical and mechanics, plating, welding, boiler making, instrumentation, and it has a very close relationship with the corporate sector. To his left is Ahmad Bagre. Ahmad is the Director of Programs and Head of Electrical and Environmental Engineering at the Institute for Water and Environmental Engineering, also known as 2IE Foundation, which is based in Burkina Faso. The Institute offers tertiary and vocational education and focuses on a number of sectors within the electrical and water management and energy arena. And to his left is Rebecca Harrison. Rebecca is the CEO and co-founder of the African Management Initiative. This is a social enterprise which focuses on affordable management training across the continent, and particularly a huge focus with the use of technology. So let me set the stage, though the Minister's done a terrific job of setting the stage for our discussion. We are on a continent which is fast-moving. A number of countries, as we've heard earlier, have exponential growth rates over the last decade. Many countries close to 60% of their population under the age of 30, so it's a young population. And in order to sustain this kind of growth and momentum, we need to invest considerably in human capital. The name of the game today is also job creation. And job creation, as the Minister mentioned a moment ago, requires multiple things. First and foremost, great policies, enlightened policies, which are actually driving and creating room for private sector to grow and to thrive, partnerships with the private sector. But across the board, what the private sector and government need is to ensure high quality and relevance in terms of education and training. More so, given the organizations which are represented on this panel, we also need to shift the image of technical and vocational education. This is a pathway which is no longer a pathway for those who didn't make it for higher education. It needs to be seen as a very attractive and compelling pathway for young people. I'm glad the Minister raised the issue of gender, because that's also going to be a topic which this panel will discuss. Now, without much further ado, Richard, let me start with you. And talk to you about what it is you're doing at the Artisan Training Institute. One of the key challenges, as we know, is ensuring that young people have relevant skills, high quality skills, and skills which employers actually desire. How does your institute tightly weave relevance and a connection to the private sector?
Thank you very much, Rita. I'd like to just correct something that you said earlier on. ATI is actually a private limited company, but we have strong ties to
Thank you.
the NGO sector. I'd like to say that we're extremely fortunate. You know, South Africa is a land of extreme contrasts, and this is indicated as well in our skills development framework. So let me quickly gloss over the structure that exists, which I believe is one that could certainly be copied elsewhere. We have a national skills framework that's set up in conjunction with the Skills Development Act, whereby all employers up to above a certain ceiling pay 1% of payroll to the skills development levy, which is then administered by what we call SETAs, or Sector Education Training Authorities. And these are the business sectors that have been split up into the various industries and commerce that exists, so that they can more closely take care of the training within that sector. Then the process works quite well in that through communication between the SETA, or through the SETA, we find that labor and companies and government share in terms of what is the pivotal training required in that sector. When it's identified as pivotal training, there are then incentives provided through the Skills Development Act, whereby if you identify members of your staff or your workforce as needing training within those pivotal areas, that you would then have them trained, which cost the company bears, but then at the end of the year's training, we have what we call a workplace skills plan that is provided at the beginning of the year, and then the annual training report at the end of the year. And if the annual training report captures that you have indeed trained in terms of your plan, you are able to secure grants, which literally, in effect, pays you back for the training that you've done. So in this way, we're getting good identification, Rita, around what industry in the various sectors is needing. And then we come to agreement as to what within those would be specifically pivotal to take those sectors forward. And then obviously business is incentivized to spend their training spend on that pivotal training because they get most of it back. So in theory, that's what we have. A tremendous institutional framework for all of this to take place. What actually happens in many instances, and I'm not saying all, but we have several of our SETAs that are dysfunctional, and it's got much more to do with the people that are running them and the mismanagement of them and the funds than it has to do with the system. I think the system is a good one. It just needs the right people to run them. So that's where ATI is. We plug into providing, we seek accreditation with those SETAs that cover, for instance, the mining industry and the metal and engineering industries, etc. And then we see their arts and training needs. But then we take it one step further with the emphasis on quality. We do deep assessments around the trainability of the people that are offered the positions. And then we ensure quality training around that, so that we don't have what's happening in many places in our country, whereby people are coming out with a piece of paper, but not really competent. And you know, it might sound lighthearted, but every time it rains in Johannesburg, I always think to myself, well, it's going to take twice as long to get home because all the traffic lights, well, many traffic lights stop working. And when the department did an assessment around it, it's because many of the electricians actually didn't know that you had to protect wiring from getting wet. And every time it rained, it was blowing the wiring and the traffic lights. It's that sort of thing that's really unacceptable. And that's the ATI differentiation factor, is that if we can provide consistent quality outputs, then we're going to be the come-to organization. And that serves the greater good, because those are the sorts of things that play out, the traffic light situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ahmed, we'll follow up with you next. Your organization has an extraordinary track record. What I was able to see is 90% of your graduates are able to find employment within 6 months. Yeah. Can you talk about the success and what's behind that success? And can you also speak to entrepreneurship in your training?
Okay. Thank you. Firstly, I want to introduce TVET. TVET is an institute created by the French government and 14 African-speaking French countries just after the independence. And the goal is to train people for the administration. And in 2007, you know that we have the private companies is coming up, and the administration people don't want to go to administration. And 2IE changed the strategy and take the name right now 2IE. And previously, the management system is based off public administration. And nowadays is a private, public partnerships. It means that in the board of 2IE, we have administration for the system countries, private companies, and financial and technical board. 2IE is in the field of civil engineering, hydraulic, water, drinking water and irrigation water, and electrical and energy field. Okay. In 2IE, we are not just running a program. The program is built, taking in account the need of the enterprise. Because we notice that in Africa, we have many graduates without job, jobless, but the job is there, but the students don't have the skill to go to this job. That is why we are working with the enterprise to make a program. In 2IE, we have a department called Technopole. And the Technopole is in a partnership relation with the partnership companies and so and so. So after getting the need of the enterprise, we set up the program. And this program is validated by the enterprise and implemented with the head of the enterprise. We receive some lecturers coming from the enterprise so that we know that the skill that the student will get will be in adequation with the need of the enterprise. And if I talk about the lecturers, in 2IE, I can say that 95% of the lecturers have a private background, so they know exactly what the enterprise need. Okay. And with our Technopole, we have a very strong relationship with the enterprise. Many of our students, for the first year, because we have a School of Engineer. The School of Engineer, we have two segments. The first segment is the bachelor's segment, and the second is the master one. And from first year to the final year, the master program, the students are obliged to spend an internship in the enterprise. And this internship is between 12 weeks and 25 weeks. It depends of the level. And even in 2IE, we are working as an enterprise. Because if you come to Ouagadougou, we'll see that on the campus, we are running two enterprises inside of the institute. We have one enterprise working in the field of nutrition, other in the field of energy. And even for the student, they have what we call the junior enterprise. The junior enterprise is like an enterprise, but these students, when they have a project coming from the private sector, private company, the lecturers help the student to make the project. And another thing is we have what we call incubator, 2IE incubator. 2IE incubator is for our students who have an idea, a project to build, to create enterprise. So they can still on the institute and have help coming from the lecturers and from the professional in order to well build their project. And entrepreneurship is a part of our program. It's not only given the engineers program, because we know that nowadays, if you have a student who can identify the opportunities, communicate and lead teams, build a business plan, and even sell new products these students can easily find a job more than those who have just an engineer background. Okay, I think that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we've heard about a really tight-knit, from Richard, a really tight and close cooperation with the private sector and a very clear definition, not only of skills which are required, but also an assessment of candidates who come through for the training. At 2IE, we've heard about a very wholly integrated model, which ensures that not only the faculty understand what the private sector needs are, but students are actually having hands-on learning in terms of experiential learning at 2IE itself. So we come to you, Rebecca, as founder of the African Management Initiative. Speak to us a little bit about how you ensure content is relevant, and that the folks who actually receive the training are thinking about their own mobility through the enterprises that they're part of or enterprises they're about to join.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. It sounds like relevance has been a real theme so far this morning, and it's a core part of our identity at AMI. I'll just give you a little bit of background first. So, African Management Initiative, we're a social enterprise, and we're pioneering a scalable approach to skills development in Africa. As the name suggests, we do focus on management and business skills, but that also extends to entrepreneurship and to the soft skills that help young people coming into the workforce succeed at work and become effective. And so I guess our innovation is around our model of delivery. We've developed quite a unique approach to learning and development. That it's a blended learning approach. So we combine the power of web and mobile to be able to scale and drive down costs. So we deliver high quality content through web and mobile, and combine that with interactive, practical in-person workshops, and then peer-to-peer coaching, feedback, and mentoring tools. So to create a whole 360 approach to learning, but then application on the job. And a little bit, like we've heard from the other panelists, we're really trying to shift the conversation from credentialism, which is big in the markets that we work in, to competence, focusing on helping organizations and individuals build real competence and therefore performance. We have two areas of focus. The first is we focus on building the capacity of individuals who are already employed, so already within the labor force. And our theory of change, I guess, is that if we can build the skills and the competence, the performance of those people, they in turn will drive the performance of their organizations. That leads to competitive companies who create jobs and strengthen the resilience of communities. And secondly, of course, we don't want to stop at the 100 million or so people that are already employed. There's also many, many people on the fringes of the labour market who also need to develop the skills so that they can break into to the jobs market. And that's both entrepreneurs, often fledgling entrepreneurs we work with, and those who are perhaps not yet employed, so coming out of formal education. And how do we ensure relevance? So I think for us, it's really been a whole shift in mindset. We don't see ourselves as an education provider trying to then translate education into employment. We're actually deeply rooted in the labor, in the jobs market. And so that's where we started with working with organizations and those who are already employed to really understand through our clients, what are the needs of companies, growing companies and organizations on the continent. And that's enabled us to, I guess it's created a feedback loop where we can iterate and improve not only our content, but also the way that we deliver it and the context around the content to be able to reach those who aren't yet in the labour force. And just to give a couple of quick examples, so we've recently developed a program called Launchpad, Success at Work in 21st Century Africa. And this was in response to the companies we were working with telling us, okay, thanks for strengthening the capacity of our current employees. They're doing better, they're performing more effectively, they're applying what they learn on the job. But how do we fill the gaps in our organization? We can't find people who are qualified, and it's this education to employment gap we hear about all the time. So we work with them to develop a program that we know will meet the needs in their organizations. And Launchpad is designed in direct response to the need of employers. And it's now getting to the point where we can start to tweak that for specific sectors. So had a really interesting conversation around the need for, a lot of the companies we work with have last mile, base of the pyramid distribution networks. Companies are telling us they need people to fill those positions. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could equip and train vulnerable young people in those communities to do those jobs? And just the second example quickly is a program we're running at the moment with women entrepreneurs. We're working with a funder who specifically wanted to move the needle on access to finance for women entrepreneurs, and briefed us with creating a program that was going to result in more women entrepreneurs accessing loans specifically, so first-time loans. So traditionally the approach would be, go out and look in some textbooks, find the kind of traditional finance curriculum, teach that, and hope that that translates into more loans. We actually went out, we did an analysis of banks around the region, looked at their loan applications, developed a generic loan application, and built a program, a course, a set of case studies and activities that where the output is a loan application that we know, if it's done correctly, will be embraced by the majority of the banks that we're working with. So I guess it's that real rootedness in the labour market with companies, with intermediaries, and translating that back into learning and development rather than the other way around.
So it's a closed loop in terms of how
exactly.
you process information. I'd like to just come back to Ahmed and to Richard. Yeah. Rebecca, you mentioned very quickly the notion of the last mile. So it's about including people who aren't included in the system right now. So women, young people, clearly, but also young people who are in particularly vulnerable situations in terms of accessing this training. How are you, both of you, addressing the issue of gender and for young people?
Rita, at ATI, we've got a very formal process that we're following to absolutely ensure it. First and foremost, there's that legislation I was speaking about, which incentivizes a business to increase the female content of their workforce, and also incentivizes them to train the females' content of their workforce. But we, for instance, I see the TISA Foundation reps here. We have a very strong relationship with them. We've had for several years now, whereby they've donated millions of rands for us to be able to find talented people and then train them at ATI, and then have them placed. A very important point, the networks that are created with some of those large corporates that are connected to the TISA Foundation, I'll leave it up to start providing places for people that we have to support, as long as they're quality people. But from a gender point of view, they also insist it's a precondition that 50% of them shall be ladies. So it's really built into our system very well.
Good. Great.
Okay. For 2IE, we have a program called a strategy orientation program set up for the 5 last year. It is ended this year, 2015. And this program is written that we have to get 25% for ladies in our school. And nowadays we have 27%. That means that the goal has been reached. And for the other people, we know how to find a scholarship for those who don't have money to pay the scholarship and institution. Like we are working with DAD, is a German cooperation, DDC for Switzerland, I think, cooperation, and the French cooperation too. Even with the African Bank of Development and the World Bank. And for the African Bank and African Development Bank, we set up a program for the post-conflict zone. And this post-conflict zone, we receive the students coming from this post-conflict. We know that for this country, it's very difficult for them to find money and to pay the scholarship. So the African Bank of Development helped them to come to IE. And we have a school. It's not a school, it's a part of 2IE, but this one is all in ladies. 20 ladies, first year and second year. We train them for what we call it, I don't know the name in English, but in French we call it a grande école. So they have 2 years, and after the 2 years, they can make a test to go to the high school. And nowadays, we have more than 15 who are in French, making aeronautic, telecommunication, and gene processes. But this class is only female. But this year, we say that the nature doesn't want only ladies, so we add some guys, but they are not just 5 guys, 15 ladies. I'm saying that is the program.
Okay, that's great. So, Minister, I have a question for you before I open up to the rest of the panelists here, and also to the floor for questions. You work with a number of different types of funders. And when you look at the opportunities or the challenges ahead for a country like Rwanda, in terms of really advancing vocational and technical training, where do you see the role for philanthropy to have a profound impact, and what could it accelerate?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I will see philanthropies playing a very important role in 3 to 4 major areas. The first and most important, and this is go with the 3 principles of education, from access, quality, and relevance. So as far as access is concerned, I see philanthropy play an important role to make sure that we raise the inclusiveness. By inclusiveness, include the gender, for example, making sure that female, because as I mentioned before, in the case of Rwanda, if I look at the vocational, we are only at 17% of female enrollment into TVET. And our plan is to make sure that in the 5 years to come, we'll reach 50%. And we know we'll not be able, because within the education sector itself, we have competition from basic education, higher education, vocational. So I think it's very important that philanthropy consider that aspect of addressing really female, and that have actually multiple impact. When you are able to provide opportunities to female to access vocational, then we create opportunity for them to become self-reliant. So that's so important. Again, as far as access is concerned, we know some of the places, particularly in the rural areas, it's quite hard for us to expand access to vocational. Again, I see a great opportunity working with philanthropists to make sure that we raise access even in those remote areas. The second aspect, the second role that I feel that philanthropy can also be very critical is really in terms of quality. For example, as I said before, as we raise the number of young people going to vocational skills, the need to get qualified trainers is so important. So what are the interventions that we can make to make sure that we get the right people, they have good training, and they are also motivated? So there are a number of mechanisms that can be put in place to raise the retention of qualified trainers in this perspective. Now, as far as relevance is concerned, because in the end, that's really where the key issue is. As some of my colleagues mentioned before, as far as Africa is concerned, and Rwanda in particular, we are talking about a great number of youth. And we are talking about a limited number of placement available. So what are the mechanisms to, from access to finance, so how philanthropy can support capacity building of microfinance institutions, how philanthropy can support raising the guarantee fund so that we can provide to as many young people as possible access to finance to facilitate establishment of startup. So that's also a very important area that I believe philanthropists will be important. Now, moving forward, I know some of the philanthropists are supporting scholarship to a number of African talented students going to United States or Canada. That's fine. But I don't see it as a long-term plan. I think what is important is to support local institutions, to build capacity of local institutions, particularly in vocational or higher education, so that Africans can stay home. They can, and that will actually create another great thing that we are missing. We are talking about regionalization, but Africans, they don't meet. We need our talent people to meet somewhere. I would like to see potential to create regional center of excellence. I know later in the day we'll be talking about a center of excellence. I think we need at the center, beyond bringing technology, bringing know-how, it's also an opportunity to create a forum for African talented or African students to meet and discuss on issues that are contextualized. So localization of these opportunities is, to me, another area where I feel philanthropists can be very critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me open up the floor and just have a series of questions, and we'll note them down, and then we'll open them up to the panel. So right there, Leila.
Thank you so much. I was trying to use my outside voice. One of the things that we've noticed is that employers are often driving the need to have these credentials. It's a big problem for us. We offer a digital certificate, and a lot of the students who graduate from our programs are then stuck because employers demand that they have some sort of a physical certificate. I'm wondering what we can do to help coach employers in a lot of these countries to accept a more modern certification of competence than the traditional physical certificate. And I'm curious if other panelists have some thoughts on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Another question over there? Please wait for the mic and identify yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm on. My name is Jen Mwangi from KCB Foundation. And thank you so much, because this is a topic that is timely and a topic that will probably, we see it as so much the beginning of a solution, especially for the youth unemployment in Africa. And my question, we as KCB Foundation, we are focusing on skilling for self-employment. And indeed, as it has been mentioned, when we are there, we are so ready to support the cause, right from training to incubation and to maturity. One of the biggest challenges we are facing is with the learning institutions, the training institutions, and not just about the faculty, the trainers, as mentioned, but equipment. And especially you will see the training facilities. They're there as an infrastructure, but they will not be well equipped. Other than government that is trying, and you realize that government can only do so much, but you have the private institutions that are not able to raise capital for the machinery. And yet you realize that if you are not able to train the students with the correct and relevant equipment, it becomes very difficult, even when you move to the business sector. In the sense that, we are training them so that we can have them finally be able to produce, and produce at competitive, standards. But I don't know where the role of the philanthropists will come in, especially in equipping the institutions, and especially the private institutions, so that we can partner with both governments and the private sector institutions.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Kambangu Gashege from Gearbox in Kenya. And my question is to Richard Lewis, and really was nested a little bit in what Jane just asked, but I'll repeat it anyway for emphasis. If you find within your training programs that one of the artisans has maybe an innovation that probably could lead to a business, rather than, I guess the focus that you mostly have is preparing people for employment, but in the event that somebody has something that can become a business, do you have a program that could lead them along, maybe some incubation program to start their own business within the technology space?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, and let me take one more question while Richard's thinking. Any more questions? Yep, right next to Kamal.
The table.
That table is very busy.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel. I'm also from KCB Foundation. It's not a question. It's more a comment to participants because of what we have seen as experience. A lot of training is done. A lot of people have skills, but a lot of philanthropists still have a checklist and they say we cannot give you access to finance to start your business or as loans. For us, we have taken a risk and it works. And I would just encourage other people to try out, even if not the entire amount, some amount, so that that checkbox you say, I cannot give a loan because I don't know what this money will be used for. Take the risk because it really helps these entrepreneurs to get access to money. And so philanthropists, we need to be a little bit flexible and introduce loans, because I know in many organizations are not financing the loans for the startups. Okay. Thank you.
Is there a question? Any other questions in the room? Yes, over there. Just wait for the mic. And tell us your name.
Thank you. My name is Rosine Rugeni. I'm the country director of Indigo Africa. This question will go to my minister. As the KCB person just said, a lot of people get trained, especially young or women. But it is difficult really to have those people create their own business or become entrepreneurs. Not all of them become entrepreneurs or start their businesses. In which ways do you work with the businesses or organizations such as Indigo Africa, which provide a market, but also vocational and business trainings that links to the market that we are providing to those women? So I would just explain a little bit about what we do. We create markets, especially in the US, to artisans, mostly women and the young girls. And one of the challenges that we have is that in Rwanda, the government has done a really good job in sensitizing women to join cooperatives to work together. But there is a challenge of giving trainings to the women to know how to manage their cooperatives. That's how Indigo comes and train them to become, to manage their businesses. But also we train them in doing products, in creating products that can be sold in the US. We teach them about supply chain in the US. So this is the challenge we see here in Rwanda, that many young people get really stuck in really knowing how to access that market that is out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Richard, why don't you start off first by the question which is addressed to you by Kamal.
Certainly, and hopefully it might even cover the question around the not being properly equipped from an equipment point of view. We, as I said when I first spoke, at ATI we decided our differentiation factor was quality. When people are being sausage machined through institutions, what's going to make you stick out? It's to not sausage machine. It's to dig down and really make a difference. So we keep a very strong eye out for talent within the talent pool that's come along. We have various assessment tools, rating tools that are taking place. There's a lot of direct one-on-one engagement with their lecturers who also have to feed back, or their instructors. And if we then perceive that whether they've come from through the donor program, or whether they have come from the corporate sector where they've sent staff to come and be trained by us, we give feedback to them in a quite a detailed form around those that are showing promise around leadership, management, and we believe could fulfill a higher role within the companies in due course if that was attended to, as well as further education. Luckily, with some of our donor funders, such as our partnership with TISO, is that they provide bursaries and further and higher education to those that we possibly feedback as being talent that's been earmarked. And we do the same when we feedback to the management of companies. We say, these people have shown promise in this area, and we believe that that they should be taken care of and nurtured in a rapid speed elevation process, talent management in your company. But what we have found quite interesting is we've managed to get a lot of equipment placed because of we've offered. We go to those manufacturers that make that equipment, and we find out what they'd be prepared to give to us, and then we take a whole chunk of their students on a sort of periodical intervals where they come for free or at great discounts, but it's not for free because they're actually paying through their equipment what we have. But of course we get hugely discounted rates for that. And then we try and get funding from philanthropists to purchase that equipment from them to provide it to us at a hugely discounted rate. So if that makes sense, but it's helped us a lot. It really has. So we use that relationship to get the equipment, and then we use that relationship to get the discount, which then costs less to purchase for whoever is buying it.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Minister, would you like to address the question about how government partners with organizations like Indigo to prepare women
First of all,
operatives?
let me really appreciate what Indigo is doing, particularly in terms of facilitating cooperatives to access market, not only in Rwanda but even abroad. So I think there are two important issues that I see. One is the communication. So how do we make sure that we establish a relationship with organizations like Indigo or others that can support us to create opportunities for access to market. So that's one thing. The second is, as part still of the communication, I want to share with you some examples of some of the things that we've been doing to support particularly cooperative or associations to move into into production. One is what we call a skill. We have a fund that was established together with the World Bank, where we call a skills facility, a skill development facility. It's a fund that is competitive, where we call organizations, all kinds of organizations, being private or training providers, so they can apply and clearly show what they need in terms of training. It can be technical, it can be entrepreneur or whatever. And then once they get a fund, they can definitely train their own people and also open up for other people as well. And we have a clear monitoring mechanism to keep looking at how the training evolves. But we also encourage these organizations, once the fund is over, because the fund allows them to buy even some equipment. So they can buy equipment, they can buy tools, but we encourage them not just to make it once. They can keep it up, and we can continue this support, and that will be very important. Another example is what is known as the Adolescent Girls Initiative. Again, this is a program that we had with the World Bank and Nikki Foundation. We train around 3,000 young girls that drop out from education, and we provided hands-on skills, all kinds of hands-on skills, but there was also support to connect them with microfinance so that they can really start establishing companies in terms of association and so on and so forth. But again, in this particular case, there is a need to establish a mechanism to continue monitoring their progress and also open up and also expand this kind of program beyond the fund that we had. So scaling is again another thing that I feel the philanthropists can be very supportive, is scaling models that have worked. So how do we scale them up? How do we make sure that we expand access to as many people as possible? And lastly, there's also a need to strengthen coordination. You see, for example, the examples you gave was cooperative. We have what is known as a Rwanda Cooperative Agency. And that really agency will definitely be responsible for capacity development. And while there's a need for us to intervene, we can link up with them. Because I think the point she's making, really making sure that whatever training we do actually lead to specific job, to specific employment, and particular to market is so critical. And that's why I see this collaboration become very important, this perspective.
That's great. Now, time is short. Rebecca, would you respond to Lila's question about how do we encourage employers to adopt a more competence-based training?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's no easy answer, unfortunately. But I mean, I guess the challenge we're facing is that if we want to address the scale of the challenge, if we want to really ensure that we take advantage of the demographic dividend and get people into jobs, then we've got to completely change the economics of scale, and we need to reduce the cost of training dramatically and increase the scale. So we've managed to reduce the cost of delivering training by, to about 1/10 of the cost of a traditional training delivery model. But in order to do that, of course, we need to remove things like sending a physical certificate and having bricks and mortar buildings. And those are the things that traditionally have been the signifiers of quality for a lot of organizations around education. So for us, I mean, we've taken a long long-term view. We're in this for the long haul, and we believe that ultimately the evidence that's coming out of our work will speak for itself. So we believe we can deliver a really high-impact, high-quality experience for the tenth of the cost, and we can deliver evidence over time to show how that works. It's why we've chosen to focus initially on working with employers, because if you're working with employers on learners that are already in the organization, we can use data and testimonials to demonstrate to them that we are building competence. We don't have to rely on a certificate then.
Thank you. We're just out
sorry.
of time. I'm so sorry, but thank you. We can go on for quite a bit more. So I hope you all will join me and thank the panelists, and we'll.
Thank you.
And